Hello everyone and welcome to a video about my LEGO Star Wars MOC. It's a Munificent class star frigate from the Clone Wars and Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. And the reason I made this is because I was fooling around in Bricklink Studio one day and thinking about how LEGO's never actually rendered this ship in any format outside of their video games. They've never even made a polybag, a miniature. I don't even know if they've made an advent calendar version of this, and certainly no full-scale play sets or UCS sets or anything of the like. And I think that's a shame because this ship features so prominently in the Clone Wars. It's also all over the Battle of Coruscant at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. So it's one that's long overdue for some proper treatment from LEGO, but for now, this is the best, next best thing that I could come up with. It's not exactly polybag scale. It is a little bit bigger than that, but it was really just the smallest scale where I felt like I could capture the detail adequately. Of course, this is a couple iterations in. I started with something that looked okay and was a horrendous fragile mess, iterated it until it looked a little bit better and is a little stronger. However, I will say the main problem with this guy is it's still not all that strong. So it kind of has a couple points where it can just fall apart because this is all brick built. I wasn't really able to get any technique involved in strengthening the structure or anything just because of how genuinely tiny this thing is. You know, that's definitely something I could look at for future iterations, but as of right now, this is just a display piece only, and I will be leaving it on this little stand that I made for it because honestly, it's just a little bit too fragile. Definitely not able to be played with at all. However, let's just take a quick look at kind of the design. I think we'll start at the front of the ship and kind of work our way back. So if we look at the very front, I have actually captured the turbo laser cannons. If you can kind of see there, it's just not, entirely what they look like in universe, but I think it was better than not having them anywhere, and I accomplished that with those Exo-Force robot hands. You can kind of see them if I play around in the light a bit. So I really did want to get that detail, so I'm glad I was able to. Those little clip pieces are to represent towers and antennae. This thing has tons of them all over in universe, and I wasn't able to put, all those little tiny things in there, but I used these little clip pieces and this little bar on this round tile piece, also to represent kind of a tower or an antenna. For the lights of the ship, the windows and such, I just kind of littered a few of these 1x2 trans yellow tiles throughout to kind of give that impression. And for the bridge, really, I thought this was more of a turquoise color, so I went with I think this is trans light blue or trans medium blue. I don't remember what it's called, but either way, for the bridge, I went with that color because I genuinely thought there was a bit of a difference between the windows on the body of the ship and the windows on the bridge. So that's why I did that. I think if you kind of rotate this thing around, the silhouette is pretty darn correct. I used a lot of reference photos to get the dimensions like really as close as I could get in Lego form. I think I did a decent job, and this part here was pretty difficult. It's still not perfectly represented, but that little lower lip of this thing, I do think this thing looks pretty shark-like in general, which is pretty cool. But of course, I was just trying to replicate the in-universe design. I used some little white 1x1 round tiles to try to represent the Separatist insignias. There weren't any printed ones I could use, unfortunately, in that scale, but that's okay. Now we have these giant porthole-looking things on the side. There's a bunch of them on the actual ship. I just used empty studs to try and replicate that a little bit. It's a little uneven, which I don't love, but I think it, for the most part, gets the point across. And then we have this massive wing here, and it has this little jagged design to it in universe, so I try to replicate that. It's maybe a bit exaggerated here, but there's no real way to do it any smaller than what I did here. It's got these little, I don't even know what you would call these, hanging off of it. And genuinely, when I looked at the photos of it, this massive wing in the middle looked a different color to me. It looked lighter gray than the rest of the ship, so that's why I represented it in light bluish gray. And another note on the color, I've seen this depicted a lot in light bluish gray when people make MOCs of this. To me, when I look at photos and when I watch the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, I see dark bluish gray, but that may be just me because I also see the Death Star and the Executor as a darker shade of gray, and Lego always seems to do light bluish gray for those. So that's just me, but that is genuinely what I see. I think it's a darker shade, and I think dark bluish gray fits better, so that's what I did. Now, getting this fin was by far the most difficult aspect of this entire thing. In fact, this entire back of the ship, since it's so skeletal, it's really hard to connect everything up, and that was just kind of a nightmare. It's also still pretty fragile back here because there's some funky connections and odd building techniques that I use, and it's still definitely not perfect, but you know, it's better than it was in previous iterations, and I think it looks good enough. I also tried to capture this, you know, underneath like shielding here. I tried to kind of imply that this goes all the way around like it does, and of course it'd be so much thinner in universe, but the Lego pieces are bulky, so I did what I could there. And then what I'm really proud of is that I was able to actually represent all of the engines that this thing has. This is an accurate layout of the engines, 1, 2, and then 4. At least I'm pretty sure it is. I looked at a million photos to try and get this right, and really used my thinker to get all of those represented. Unfortunately, there was just no way to put any thrust into those little binocular pieces there, and you can see this point is just so fragile. I don't really have any ideas on strengthening that, but if something comes to me, I definitely will iterate this ship again. I'm also pretty proud of how all this turned out, this underbelly, just kind of the shaping and the way it kind of continues into here. This is blockier, but just all this, I'm pretty proud of the way that turned out. Yeah, so there's another look at these engines and, you know, the kind of the back area of the ship. This is also another fragile area, so I try not to really mess with it at all, but that's why I built this little stand. It's pretty much a nothing burger, just something I whipped up in about a minute, so no sense in really looking too deep into that, but I just designed it to fit with the slopes on the underside of the ship so it can kind of just sit there, and that's kind of where the center of gravity is, so it works. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed this mock. Tell me your feedback on it. Let me know if this inspired you to make something or if you've ever made your own version of this. I'd be very interested. I always love seeing people's mocks, so I decided I'd try to share one of mine today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.